And, you know, it actually, this is wonderful. So we have someone from Moorhead, someone from Coon Rapids, and Natalie, are you from Park Rapids, or where do you live?
I live in Perham.
Oh, you live in Perham.
Yeah.
Oh, that's where Sue's from originally. Yeah. So look at small stinking world, right? Or Minnesota County or state. Anyway, so this is just kind of a interesting time to be able to try new things. So thank you for being patient with the technology. And actually, I love you guys over at Studio 176 for being open to this, because I mean, hey, what the heck?
Oh, this is bad.
Right? we gotta do something. Anyway, so the show that I brought up there was a lot of the work from my remote exhibit that I had at the Paramount in St. Cloud this winter, which closed the end of February, and then the rest of the world closed in middle of March. So, you know, we continued moving forward on the idea of just simply hanging the work, not really knowing what was going to happen, and just, you know, even if people have to peek in the window, so be it. If you're going to have to look at the art with a mask on, so be it. If we're going to have conversations online, you know what? Many of us we're already doing it because we're so far apart from each other. So this was definitely something where we were open to it. So I'm an abstract painter, bookbinder, public artist, and teaching artist. A lot of skills in my pocket, probably because of, you know, just if I felt like doing it, I did it. And so when I was a long time ago, I was given permission. I shouldn't be given permission, but sometimes you need to be given permission once. And it was by an abstract painter in Randall, Minnesota, Russell Sharon. And he actually, I don't know what words he used exactly, but he gave me permission to do the work as I wanted to do the work. And I wasn't necessarily, there was no other influences really that I was interested in locally and in person. And really what's funny is that years later, gosh, almost 10 years later, was the first time that I got to see the women abstractionists, which included, you know, Lee Krasner and I'm trying to think of who he had, Joan Mitchell. He was very similar to Joan Mitchell, and I believe had a connection to her. And so I finally got to see the women abstractionists in Denver, and I went to see it twice when I went out there to deliver and pick up a show. And I finally got to see artists that I really resonated with, and they just so happened to be women. And I realized that for a long time I was kind of in this sort of I was in this architecture field or world, which was primarily men. And so then seeing these women's work kind of allowed me to, I don't know, I didn't think it was gender, but I think gender became very important later on in my career. It didn't seem to be when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, but later on I started learning a lot about it, especially as you age. Well, so this piece is actually very much related to some of those women because they weren't being watched. They were just creating work. I think it was Lee Krasner that said, I painted before, during, and after Pollock, something like that. She was a little more dramatic about it. But I realized that, you know, when you're creating work and you're not the center of attention, it becomes a new way to just grow. You know, it's just like, no one's really hovering over me, but at the same time, maybe no one's paying attention either. So I kind of use my more recent years as kind of just doing whatever. And this piece in particular is No One's Even Watching. I think I named this. But so that's sort of something that I think being out in greater Minnesota, sometimes you don't get to exhibit as much. And so you just kind of just create, you know, and then just maybe wait until it develops.
I want you to go to the one on the bottom I used today.
That one?
I love that piece.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah. This one's, these circles. Okay, so anybody who knows my grids, I worked in grids for a long time, and grids were something about systems, where I was dealing with systems before I even realized I was dealing with systems. And I was doing that back when I was younger too. Constantly doing squares and rectangles and interconnecting them with lines and very rigid avenues. And I think that has a lot to do with my, quote, upbringing in the architecture field, because you work in pen and ink and you're constantly doing these intersections, literally. Like your line goes here and then it crosses here and does this. And so I think that I was playing with that, but with paint. And I was doing freehand. I wasn't using a brush. A lot of times I was using my fingers. So that was something that, and up until like 2016, I was doing these grids and these sort of system type pieces. Then something snapped in me. I have an origin piece across it, and I'll grab it in a little bit, but where I started breaking of the grid and went into circles, and I found that circles represented relationships. So while this one, I'm not quite sure, I feel like this one is one of the few that started resembling a thing to me. So I stopped painting and going, there's a bumblebee, that's like the first time that I've really done that. But a pollinator, because I felt it was a bit of a pollinator in how it was created. But a lot of these other circles are relationships.
So Heidi,
yeah,
we have a question about how do you those white, the one that that one too, it looks like you've scratched into it, the really bright white lines.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get those?
Okay. If I mark it just to make sure, are they
That's it. Yep.
Okay. So you mean this area right here, right?
That white line.
That little line? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I love okay. Erase. Okay, you know what I did was I actually bought, I don't know where they are. I bought them online. So I don't know where the hell they come from. But they're these little like tubes. They're like little they're not syringes, but they are they look like okay, think of a ketchup container. A commercial one, except for with a really fine tip. So what I would do is I'd take golden paints and water them down, and then shake it up and get it really thin so that it doesn't clog up. And then I would just put it over the top of my painting.
Cool.
And the ones that were affected were the ones who happened to be sitting there when I actually did it. So yeah, that was that was sort of a new thing because it wasn't, they weren't available to me really. Yeah, they were on this one, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I would let them splatter. I wouldn't clean them up. A lot of times I just let it, and the only time I do the editing is really when it's like, well, if it's really offending me and I can't live with it myself, then I'll get rid of it. But if it's like, oh, that's novel, I like that, then I'll keep it. And sometimes the splatter, sometimes the drips or whatever are really part of the conversation between the lines. So it's just the relationship. So yeah, that was sort of a fun discovery. I don't want to overdo it. I was almost about to on a couple pieces, but they're kind of fun to play with. I love new tools. So.
Did you ever study anything about Aboriginal painting?
In what geographic way? Or what geographically specific?
I'm sorry, Aboriginal Australian painting, because circles are people. In bigger circles probably represent a big group of people, but circles are people in Aboriginal Australian work. Although I'm sure there's regions and there's different meanings in different regions, but it's kind of used that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's funny is, and actually some people in the room right now know that I don't usually follow things until it's brought to my attention. So like now I'll probably see it and go, oh yeah, totally. You know, and really the circles were fairly new. So they might have been brought to my attention in some certain way. And with the amount of information that you get stuff kind of passed along to you online and everything like that, that maybe there was something that subconsciously seeped in. And Australia, or the Aboriginal cultures in Australia, I'm not as familiar with, other than, probably stereotypes from the back in the day. So, but if it is a significant symbol in other cultures, then chances are I probably did pick up on that at some point. But the relationships, it naturally happens. That's the thing, is I think that when you talk about shape and color and all that, I think that shapes and how you lay them down do naturally become personified. So circles represent something different than a rigid square. One is man-built and one is more natural, or something like that. I don't know. And then I come up with the stories after I'm finished with it and went, wow, I went down that road,
So Heidi, we have a question here. It says, throughout your career, have you ever felt bound by restrictions? It says, I struggled to find and solidify my style as an artist because all through my college career, when I could really experiment with bigger projects in different mediums, that there was always restrictions. Now it's difficult for me to let loose and paint without a plan. Any advice?
Good question. I could go into the restriction part pretty easily. Restrictions. Okay, so having limits is not a bad thing. Sometimes you just have to put some sort of framework around what you're trying to do. However, if it's being superimposed on you, that's a different issue. There was a time when I wasn't allowed to paint unless it represented some sort of financial benefit on the other end. That really ruins it for you, So when I allowed myself freedom to paint as I so choose, that actually took years for me to develop really what I wanted to do. And it really was cranking out, like seriously, cranking out, tossing a bunch of stuff, going over the top of it. And in acrylic, I can paint over and paint over and paint over until I feel that I'm done. I think what I did was, if I had restrictions, one of the restrictions was time sensitivity. So in the next 3 months, I'm going to do this body of work. I put that restriction on myself. And then whatever happened in those 3 months becomes a series. Then I exhibit it. And then I moved on to something else. That's why you'll see a dramatic change from one series to the next.
Heidi, can I ask you something?
Sure.
It sounds like you're describing parameters for your work,
Yeah.
timelines or medium.
Yeah.
Do you agree that that's more parameter based?
Yeah.
How do you see the difference, or how would you define the difference between parameter and restrictions?
Yes, so they are different words, aren't they? I think parameters is something where parameters are, to me, so restrictions. I think parameter is a better word, and maybe allows for just having those limits to just say, this is how big or small it's going to be. This is how long it's going to take. This is, those are really important. Restrictions to me sometimes are things out of your control, maybe. So financial restrictions sometimes are that, or I don't have the space, so I have to work small. Back to the Lee Krasner comment about painting while she was, Pollock was still alive. She was creating small paintings in the back room because he took up so much damn room. And then when he was no longer around, she just took off and did huge pieces. So her parameters changed, but I think one was a restriction and the other one was being set free. So I don't know. Maybe that's a whole conversation in itself. It's kind of fun.
I like how you're giving yourself assignments, you know, I mean, because when you're not in college anymore, you're not getting assignments. You have to give them to yourself, right? And give yourself your own deadlines. And sometimes a show will do that for you, but you can't always have that kind of deadline.
I think one of the biggest things that I've kind of like realized too is that like, so in college there was like an assignment and a theme that you had to like follow, but now I just find myself getting super anxious trying to just sit down and like paint without having that like guidance per se.
You fell off the cliff.
Yeah,
it's the academic cliff that you fell off of, and now you have to figure out how to not hurt yourself. It's that's actually part of any academic art thing. You'll come back to it and be like, oh man, I missed that. But don't run back to it too soon. Just say, gosh, I missed that safety zone where they gave you the parameters and they gave you these different things to consider because they're trying to teach you a lesson, right? Now you have to express yourself. So there's a different thing there. And then also you have all these other things that you're trying to accomplish. So whether it's, to make a living, to get a show, to get a grant, to whatever, so there's a whole other set of goals past that point that you have to set for yourself. Otherwise you might end up just slowly working towards nothing. And I don't know, I am goal oriented, I don't think I care as much about the external. There's times that I sit there and go, I really want to do this at some point. So how do I get there? But it's more for myself. It's not for someone else. And that seems to really help.
And that's really interesting because, right now, because we've all had to make some huge shifts, with the COVID-19 and stuff like this. And how do you make, set goals for yourself? And speaking of goals, what do you have kind of going on the horizon for yourself? I mean, that's a really loaded, huge question there, but I mean, we've all had some time, to think about this, several months. Some of us have been just scrambling to figure out, which way is up, at the moment.
Yeah, that's usually midday for me. Which way is up? I thought I was clear at like 7 in the morning, and then 2:30 hits, and I'm like, I'm gonna take a nap. What's going on? What's coming up? So I have a show coming up next week that I'm installing at Great River Arts in Little Falls, and that one is really interesting. It's a huge space that's not going to be open the entire show. How's that for an awesome opportunity? I haven't shown in, and that's where I lived before I moved to St. Joe. I haven't had a show there since 2012, and then I had the audacity to take up the whole space. Mostly because I was thinking I was going to have some student work. So I asked for the whole space, and then we have no student work, nothing. So I'm really kind of like, this is interesting. How am I going to do this? So and this is a really interesting design opportunity here, I'm going to stop sharing my painting because now I'm talking to you. So what I'm going to end up doing, I don't have any here, but there's, I picked up some cardboard palette dividers. And I know, Sue, you brought this up, and I didn't even realize that you brought it up, but I didn't really realize you brought it up until you brought it up again. Anyway, no, long story. But anyway, the brewery across the street, so you know how a crawler is shaped like this, right? Like a big beer can. And these leave these little dents onto the paper or the chipboard. And so I went over there one day and I don't remember why I grabbed them. I think I was grabbing them for drop cloths almost because I didn't like tarps because I trip on those and, you know, make a mess with them. And so, but then I painted on them one night and it took the paint really well. And so when I was trying to figure out how to fill up the space at Great River Arts and was like, I feel like investing a bunch of canvases is a stupid idea financially. Like it would be dumb to go out and buy hundreds of dollars worth of canvas for a show that nobody sees except for through a window or online, which fine, but it wasn't, you know, my bigger pieces really kind of need your face up in it. And so what I decided to do was after I did 2 paintings, I actually had 2 conversations before I did each painting. And then both paintings actually represented them, the person. And so I decided to do these like abstract portraits of people and do these connections, like this sort of conversation, and then go and paint after I'm done with the conversation, see what happens. So I should share one of the examples. Let me see if I can find one first, because it's not gonna be easy to go this abstract in this kind of well, in a climate like this where, you know, really technically, you know, nobody will or has to see it. And so what I'm hoping to do is get I want to do the, oh, maybe I don't have it on the computer. Never mind. What I'm hoping to do.
Did you take advantage of those dented circles in there?
Yeah, I did. Well, kind of. If they spoke to me, then yeah, totally. But one of them it did, and the other one it did not. So I was planning on going back to them. Okay. So let's see. I'm going to share this with you. Oh, maybe if I. Okay, can you see the cardboard?
Yes.
Okay. So this was a time lapse that I did. And this is, I believe, Lucille. Yep, this is Lucille. She's a dancer who is an extrovert living in a house full of introverts. Oh, maybe this isn't Lucille. This is Michael. He's a male nurse from Mayo Clinic. And he was explaining COVID to me. Yeah, this is Michael. And this is the first layer. However, he explained a lot of how medicine worked, meaning like how the science worked, how getting the beds ready, how Mayo Clinic worked, which, you know, we all like put that, like really understanding like what this crisis was doing, right? So what my intentions are is to do this sort of same thing where I do another one and then tell a story. And I mean, the one about Michael is kind of, I gave you the really short edited version of it. But I want to do that with about 20 of these over the 2 months of the exhibit, and then do the time lapse, tell the story, and just let people be okay with abstract work. I'm kind of sick of like, what does it mean? Well, here I gave you a meaning what was in my head when I did it and how I stopped. You know, and we can talk about the technical part of why I stopped or where I stopped or the colors I used, but that's sort of unfortunate. Like I can't really go back into my brain, you know, and go, oh, well, I was also listening to Coldplay, if that means anything, you know.
Right. But people do love the story.
Mm-hmm.
You know? I mean, that's...
They really do. I think they want to find it. And I think because if I can say it's of a nurse at Mayo Clinic, and I mean, I could go into the details of what he does. It's like end of life work. I mean, you might be able to associate some of the colors and everything like that into it. Like,
Absolutely.
Does he know?
It's a vibrant or whatever. Mm-hmm.
Does he know about this painting?
Yes. I don't know if he knows I named it after him. I should probably tell him. But yeah, the other one, Lucille knows about hers, which is, I wonder if that's a couple back. And it's, sorry, you get everything. But yeah, it's, you know, I think one of the things that I'm really excited about is the idea that I can tell stories this way because it's really about energy, you know, and I'm not like it sounds sort of voodoo-ish or whatever you want to call it, woo-woo, as they said out in California when I was out there. But it's not that. It's just more of like, you know, if you're going into your intuitive part of your brain and your heart or whatever, then you just let it go. I've stopped controlling it so much a long time ago. More specifically, probably pre-2012, but we won't go into that. But it is definitely a you know, it's a release. So then all I do is I stop and look at it. And then just say, okay, it's done now.
So have you worked on any other alternative materials besides the cardboard? Because if you have not tried tar paper, do it.
Oh.
It's amazing.
I've seen it. You know what's funny is, who was it that, maybe it was you. I don't remember who brought that up, tar paper. Somebody else works in tar paper.
Yeah, I've used it a few times and it's quite fun.
Mm-hmm. I'm enjoying the freeness of this and the fact that it's just across the street. And I think there's something about that exchange too. And it was very channeling my grandmother, you know, like use what you got rather than buying new. And,
right.
And so that was one of the things. However, if I start to really get into it, then we're in trouble.
Well, I don't know. There's still a lot of artworks out there that are on cardboard that are 50, 60, 70 years old.
I have a piece that really, my friend Bela made it, and he gave it to me, and I was, it was falling apart and everything like that. And but once we put it in frame and took care of the air issues of having it exposed, it's been fine, and it ends up, you know. So it's really a matter of protecting it after the fact. So
you'd be in trouble because you'd run out, or what do you mean?
Oh, you mean I mean just going into a whole new rationale of a whole new material. I mean, I love painting. I mean, it's just, and I like canvas. I actually am to the point where I want to upgrade my canvas, but right now, like I said, this is sort of channeling my grandma right now and just making do. I mean, we're definitely we're in a pandemic. We're gonna be heading into an economic pitfall. So really,
considering resources and delivery and availability anyway with canvases, you know,
right.
Why not use what's in front of you, if nothing else, to work out ideas and, you know.
Right. And actually, I'm kind of interested in that idea of being able to share things online and nobody really has to touch it. I mean, is our art being stolen every day? You know, we don't really know. I mean, I hate to think of it that way, but it's like, I mean, yeah, I'll put it on Canvas. I'll photograph it. I'll scan it. I'll send it some other way. And the original piece, maybe it is disposable, but I don't want to think that way. I think they will be beautiful if you bought one, framed it, and put it up above your mantle. And I think that the cardboard itself is really quite lovely. Such a good color.
Let's see. Okay. So are these abstract portraits a response to the pandemic?
Kind of, yeah. It's about relationship building in this sort of digital era. So like what I'm gonna do with these pieces when I start, so this will start next week, at the end of the week, probably July 1st. And I wanna do an interview with someone, or just talk. Like, it's not really an interview. It's just that they know that they're gonna get painted, but not them. And then I'm gonna have some sort of reflection that may or may not include a direct reference to them, or it might, you know what I mean? So like there's an animosity in it, really. It's like the blurred out interview where they become robots or something like that.
Right.
So it is coming it's coming through me in two different ways. So I don't know, I thought actually this helped me respond to a large space that I was not totally prepared for.
That's a big space.
It is a big space. And then, you know, and I lost a few months of what I thought was going to be solid work time. And so I decided to just do it this way. Plus, I think I kind of want, and I call them my locals, even though I moved 30 minutes different direction, but kind of to look at my work differently, you know, and then that way they'll take time and really look at it, especially if they know that Lucille is in there, you know, if they know Lucille. They don't.
I wanted to go back to something here.
When does the show at Great River Arts start, Heidi?
July 1st.
July 1st.
I should mention another project that I'm working on. There's like some public art stuff coming up. Now that I moved to St. Joe, there's some folks who want me to get on board on a couple ideas. But one of the things that I wanted to mention is that with the pandemic, I've learned that I really don't care about some stuff. Things that I thought mattered don't matter anymore.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have.
Yeah, the shallow stuff I just don't have time for. If I can't be teaching something new, if I can't be engaging people in a different way, if I have to do stuff the old way, which doesn't work, I'm just done with it. And I think that I've even, maybe in my shortness, I've shut people down saying that doesn't work. You can be as cute as you want. People are gonna see it as petty and ridiculous or silly, or a silly use of taxpayer money, you know, or something like that. And it's like, if I can't give it 3 or 4 layers of awesome, I'm not gonna do it. And so that's something that I think my patience level just went down to like, you know, I don't care, you know, and maybe that's good. Maybe that's just a point that I've reached in my career where I can say that and they can hear it.
I think it is. I think a lot of us are starting to voice ourselves a lot more openly because of the pandemic, where we were maybe a little bit reserved and you know, holding back.
Right, because we were kind of going with the machine. You know, and I'm not going to get into like major, you know, conversations around that. But I think
for those of you who don't know, Heidi is also a teaching artist and a bookbinder, and also has the Tiny School of Art and Design, which was meant to launch big time this summer, but due to, you know, obvious circumstances, that's kind of been put on hold.
Right.
So are you still kind of, are you just putting that stuff on hold? Are you redirecting some of those a little bit?
Well, the residencies, okay, so I'm teaching online. So that was sort of one of those shifts that took a lot more energy than I thought. It's not easy. But then I'm also thinking of how am I going to be integrated into schools next year, if at all. A lot of funding got pulled through the State Arts Board. There were 3 big projects that I was supposed to have next year, and they were pulled. We wrote the grants, we did all the work, but it is no longer. So that was sort of a bummer. However, there was, but then I had to just deal with it, you know. You had a couple beers on that Friday night when everything got pulled, and then you go, okay, now what? You know, and I at least have decent people to process that stuff with, you know, and go, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? However, the tiny school was interesting because I actually did need to do some stuff on the inside, and the midwinter did not do well. We weren't able to really get as much stuff done as we wanted. So this was sort of a blessing in disguise to be able to finish the inside and just, you know, make it better. However, the concept, so the Tiny School of Art and Design, to let you guys know, is this trailer that is, let's see, I will show you just a moment. Actually, maybe Don, you can look for it while I talk. But it's tinyschoolad.com, I think. I don't even know my own website. Anyway, tinyschoolofartdesign.com. It's a trailer that serves as a studio. And then I set up art horses. Do you guys remember what those are? They were like, you had them in art school. And so you sit on them like a horse, and then you prop your drawing pad or whatever up against the taller part of the bench, and you straddle it. So like it's right in front of you. Well, it turns out when I brought it out into public spaces, kids loved it. As soon as I said, sit on it like a horse, they really,
So Heidi, any?
go into that button, press the button
This one here?
Yeah. And then it goes to my other site. So this is all the old narrative, but basically I use the activities that I do are really based in the foundation. So I use the elements of art and principles of design. I actually put little instructions out just of what that is, the language of art, because then like this little girl, stop here. So this little girl, we had a bunch of farm produce at the farmer's market, and she looked at a cob of corn. She is like 4, right? And all I did was I said, do you see the line? And she took her finger and she sort of petted over the corn on the cob. And I said, okay, do you see some pattern? And she looked at the cobs, which you can't really see it, but she drew out the cob, the kernels. And then where's it green and where's it yellow? That's it. She's 4. She nailed it. You know, her 12-year-old sister, on the other hand, overthought it, and it didn't look anything like a corn on the cob. But the thing is I broke it down to just those few little things. And so, you know, you've got these little people, and then this one's actually really great. The mom, unfair advantage, she's a graphic designer and a photographer, so that didn't help matters. But however, her child could see what she was looking at and could, you know, kind of, you know, play around with the materials pretty well. So I use high quality materials, sponge sticks, erasers, artist pencils, and some of my favorites. And then there's a gallery at the top. And then they just take off with it. We had this set up at a festival. Some just screwed around with the materials. Others actually did drawing challenges. Those 2 were doing a challenge of some sort. They were telling each other what to do. It was hilarious. And then I teach them how to use certain materials so they're nice and accessible, right? So this is something that, I started last August, or I got it on the road last August. And then of course, after having it on the road, I kind of had to do some thinking about how certain things worked and some things didn't, and all of that. So yeah, it's a really great project. However, so I had to park it this year, also because a lot of projects got canceled, and I'm probably gonna maybe take out the art horses for a couple events towards the end of the summer, just to get people involved. I'm entertaining the idea. I guess that's the best way to say it. But I watched the news first. And so this is just sort of it's a cool project, but it can wait. It has some legs. So what I hope to do is I want to expand it to other artists. I'm actually looking to get it online so that we can do online courses. I personally don't think that it's always necessary to keep art school in the art schools. I think that there's a lot of things we could be teaching and it'll have some longevity in our lives. They have design all around them, but then they're like, I can't draw a stick figure. I'm like, not really what I asked you to do, but okay.
You know, and Tiffany and I are both, you know, of course, art teachers, and you know that. And I always think that it's always good to get just another perspective, you know,
Right.
for kids. You know, I was never so excited to have my daughter go and take classes from other people because she
Right.
only had me as.
Yeah, and that's the problem with smaller schools is, you know, they have one art teacher, if, you know, hopefully full-time art teacher. But that happens a lot in these smaller schools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is something that can pop up at any point. And what I was hoping for this last year was to show up to a variety of regular events in Little Falls, St. Cloud, St. Joe. And then that way, kids could just come and they already know how to do it. Some of the kids actually from Little Falls would come to everything and they already knew what to do. So they would be like, I know what to do. And they'd tape down their paper. They'd sit down on the, and then they knew what the materials were for. And then they were telling other kids what to do. And then the parents just raved about it because they're like, yeah, she loves coming if she knows you're there. So that was really cool. And I thought that that's where you can get regular programming if it shows up on a, at different types of events. I even showed up to the the Morrison County Fair. And I set up a couple of the art horses over by the cattle and the different animals. I don't know. I don't remember where I put them all because I didn't actually see like the drawings. They just took them with them. So I never got to see anything.
Oh.
Except for one kid, I saw one kid take it, turn it around and put it towards the tractor. He drew the tractor, but looking at it. This is the thing. It's not about from memory. It's about they're looking at it. That's actually the one step that seems to always, be the next learning step but are you looking at the cow? Did you notice that the cow only has 3 legs or whatever? You know what I mean?
Right.
And then they're like, but it has a 4th leg. I'm like, I know. Can you see the 4th leg? No. Okay, then don't put it down. Just draw it as you see it. And that's like, that as art teachers, that's like pulling teeth to get some kids to not make the 4th leg. And so it's really kind of a fun, thing for them to do. So I'm looking at maybe doing some distance drawing sessions in St. Joe and seeing how that goes, but we got to see what happens.
So, which kind of gives me, and we touched a little bit about this, but, so, how have any of the events of late between, the virus and the protests and the distance learning, has that changed your work personally, or do you find that you're going in a completely different direction, like stylistically or content-wise?
No. Okay, so because I don't know. I don't know yet because I haven't really been making work during the protests, which was something that I realized until, the protests, the ones here in Minnesota. But my level of giving a shit changed. So what I was doing was I was rearranging kind of what my positionality a little bit. So what that means for these portraits of Little Falls might be, Lord knows what I'm going to come up with and what I'm going to hear and how I'm going to portray that. I don't, maybe my gloves are off at this point. So it will be a conversation, but also it'll be an interpretation of that conversation. And it might be in color and shape and whatever, but the energy of anything could come out easily and come out and play. And that might, and people sense it. They'll look at pieces and they'll give me their interpretation of an abstract piece and they'll be like, oh, I feel this. And then I'll be like, yeah, that's there,
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
We'll see. My writing and stuff has changed. I actually stopped writing in COVID. Like I used to write a lot. And I'd say like a few days ago, I finally just broke down and just did some messy free writing just to unclog my brain. I don't know what I did or where I put it or anything like that, but I really had to.
So do you mean like do you have a presence online with your writing, or most?
Yeah, I usually do some posts that have some sort of prompting, and then or else I do blog posts or I write on my own. But yeah, I was really lobbed up and not sure how to respond to. COVID was one thing. COVID was just like, well, maybe this is my time to reassess my business. But
we did the same thing with the studio.
Right. And that was one thing, because that's sort of, I want to say it's self-serving, but it's also it's gonna evolve how we do business as artists and how we're, you know, you can't help but rethink how we do things and who has access to it. However, George Floyd, that was a whole other, I mean, everybody has to watch. You have to watch. The revolution is being televised big time. And so there's a lot of changes that hopefully will come out of this. And the work that comes out of it for me, there's tons of better work coming out of this right now, but the work that comes out of it for me, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of us that are asking that same thing, because it's kind of going back to what you said, is like, you know, if it doesn't have 4 layers to it, you know, why do it? You know, it's, you know, I'm not in that moment, at least right now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think there's always a delay too, don't you think? There's a delay. You experience it and then you need time to think about it. Although things are really changing fast in some ways.
Yeah. Well, I found that, you know, and I think that conversations, I think every day there's something added to the conversation, right? So, like today, NPR had a really fascinating conversation while where was I? I think I was coming back from Brainerd. And so I don't know what time of day it was, but it was something along the lines of, well, it wasn't agreed upon by everybody in the interview, but it was something about, you know, this is really white people against white people, which was really an interesting way of looking at it. Like the white people who understand that racism and systematic racism exists, and then those who do not believe that it exists. And that was a really interesting point that I've not heard yet. Like, and I was just like, they're driving going, huh, where's this going? And then somebody called in and said, actually, I'm gonna challenge that. And so like that conversation just kept going. And I was just like, this is fascinating. The downfall of radio is that, and driving in your car, is that you can't quick Google who's talking and where they're coming from.
Right.
But yeah, that was something that I thought was really interesting. And I'm fine with having conversations, but you know, I still try to be solution based. And so sometimes I'll pause and go, how can I enter into this conversation just a little bit more productively than just
being part of the solution rather than just
right. We're so divisive right now, but I'm not compromising my stance. I'm just trying to understand the opposition, I guess. But I don't know if that's necessarily happening on the other end, you know?
So I'm going to completely shift gears here on you. So if you're, I want you to think about art history, and I want you to put yourself on that desert island. What artist is going to be there and why?
Jesus, this is so stupid. I hate desert islands. I hate water. I kill myself. I cut off my ear. No, I become that cliche artist. Be like, this sucks. Okay, no, I'm kidding. No, I think I actually wouldn't mind hanging out with some women artists just to hear what their stories are. But
I think it'd be really interesting to get the real perspective of, you know, some of those historical women that we know about, but, you know, we're just barely touched upon in art history. And
right.
really what was the scoop, you know? So.
Right. And I think that I really did appreciate, I don't know, what is it? Is it Fifth Street Women? I'm gonna go grab it. This was such a dense book. Oh my God.
Yeah.
This one you've read?
Ninth Street Women.
That's one I read, and it was like, why haven't I heard this information before? You know, but Heidi's work reminds me a little bit of Grace Hardigan too.
Right. Yeah.
Can I see the cover closer?
I
Oh,
think
Ninth Street.
that's Helen Frank on the cover.
Yeah. It's a great, what I like about it is that, well, first of all, I did get to see these women before, or their work. And that's when I kind of understood what my influences were. I didn't know. I mean, none of these guys. I didn't know any of these artists when I went to art history classes at either Drury College or University of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember ever getting to this point. And,
Heidi, I don't know if you heard me, but your work reminds me of Grace Hardigan a
mhm.
little bit too. You know, maybe Joan Mitchell, but Grace for sure.
Mhm. I think actually my influence, the local influence, Russell Sharon, is much more Joan Mitchell. And I am more, yeah, you're right. I am more Grace Hardigan. So let's see. Let me find an example of her work. If I have it. Well, it's so
Right in the middle, I think.
that's funny. I know where her stuff is. Yes, let's see. I'm trying to find one, the ones that, oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah, okay. Let's see, where does it all go up to? So she has, and what's really interesting is her portraits are very similar to what I've done in the past, but here, children, that's her work here on the side. And I actually have one of the big women abstractionist books too. And yeah, it's really, it's like amazing. And I know that seems really, I don't know. I think maybe why I didn't get into art history is because it didn't speak to me. So I just kind of fell asleep. They were so long. I just wanted to paint. And I think the only artist that I really appreciated back then was probably like Kandinsky and
I can see that in your work.
Mondrian, you know? And you can see the Kandinsky kind of in this piece back behind me. Because it was related to music, but otherwise the only art history that I liked was African American art history, and that might go straight back to the Cosby Show, heaven forbid. But I mean, I remember watching, I learned more on that show about art than anything else in my life. I was living in Alexandria, you know, like I never went to a museum until college. I think Sue and I talked about that. Never been to a gallery or a museum, right? Until we went to college. I went to a theater in my high school year, or my senior year.
Right.
Otherwise, I didn't have access to any of it. So if it wasn't on MTV or the Cosby Show, I was out of luck.
So we are just about out of our Facebook live streaming time, and we can continue this conversation, especially for those who have joined us on the Zoom meeting and want to ask questions to Heidi or any one of us from Studio 176. We'll stay on for another 10 minutes or 15 minutes or so, but we're going to end the live Facebook feed, but not before we give a couple of plugs to Heidi on what's coming up for you. Maybe talk about your show again, when that happens, where they can find it, your website, and your workshops coming up.
Yeah, so we've got, I'll be in Park Rapids on what day? Oh, Saturday from 11 to 3. So at Studio 176, it's a small space, so because of social distancing, we want to keep it really simple. So, you know, let us know you're coming and we'll make space. I think that's the best way to look at it at this point.
Right. You can send us a message on Facebook at Studio 176 or our email, which should be on our website. Correct, Jeremy? Is that correct? Yeah, which is artinfo176 at studio-176.com.
Or direct messages on
Or
Instagram.
click on it. Yeah.
And then the other fun
And that
project,
show is coming down. I'm sorry, that show is coming down on Saturday.
yeah.
Right? Okay.
And then the other thing that we have going on is the attempt, and I've been doing online classes for a while, but this is the first time we've attempted it organizationally, you know, between an organization and artists. I usually do it I do out school, but we're gonna do it's called Art Together. And it's basically, you know, an art class where you could maybe invite your niece or nephew, grandkids. Maybe you can bring a couple friends together to make art with us. We're reserving a full week where it'll become, we're gonna see how it works out. So you sign up and there's 3 different time slots that you can choose from throughout the week. So you'll learn a bunch of stuff to do together. You can talk while you're doing it, but you also have an art teacher sitting there with you, instructing like the activities. You can either be with them and they're just taking the class with you. So, you know, grandma and grandchild, you know, can hang out. Or else it could be, maybe it's a niece or nephew across the country that you can't see because travel is restricted. So we're gonna give that a try. So that one's gonna be fun. All sorts of different types of activities to kind of keep things interesting. Yeah, those are the 2 things we got with Studio 176.